Hello, chat. So we are going to start the stream now. Sorry for keeping you wait. Um, what we're doing now is basically we're setting up this new MacBook for web development, and on the three last streams, I believe, what we did is we set up our terminal, installed few essentials like brew, we installed Git, we configured our Z shell, we installed vscode, configured fonts, installed few plugins, Oxide, FCF, and we synchronize version control our configs via store. All my dot files are on GitHub right now. The links will be in the description of this word and later on YouTube as well. We picked item color theme. We installed Node.js version manager, and it was FNM. Then we were figuring out how can we manage versions of Python, and we decided to go with just Homebrew and just use specific versions for specific needs. It was quite simple. So now we are going to configure our VS Code. So that will be the topic for today, and just note this resource here. So the VS Code configuration will be available on my GitHub as well. So yeah, I guess we can just start. Now, for the last couple of years, I was using VS Code mostly VS Code for development. Before that, I was switching on and off between NeoVim and Emacs and JetBrains IDEs, so I tried all of them. This time, I would like to still have VS Code because it would be a little bit hard to transition directly to NeoVim. However, the eventual goal would be try to utilize NeoVim as much as I can, purely because there are still a couple of optimizations in my workflow that I can do that I think I want to do, especially when it comes to the jumping around windows and managing my file structure of the project. There is a plugin in NeoVim called Oil, for example, that I would like to actually try. But yeah, for now, for today, we are just going to configure VS Code, and so that in any case, I won't be able to switch to NeoVim right away. It will be somewhat slower transition. So we'll start with VS Code, and we're just going to use Vim extension with VS Code as well, because even if you are not using NeoVim, I believe not using Vim key bindings actually makes you slower, and therefore I'm going to install that at least for VS Code. I'm not an expert Vim user, however, even with the little basic knowledge that I have, I'm still faster than I would be without it. Yeah. So for the sake of checking our config, what we are going to do is we are going to create an example project, and we're going to use Next.js for that. It's a React meta framework. So let me just check. So if we go to Next.js website, yep, we're just going to do this. And we're going to create a directory called code. Just going to have our projects there. So yeah, let's run this command. Let's double check that our node version and everything is installed, actually, just in case. Last stream, yeah, we're good. Okay, so just going to do this. Yep, sure. Project name, so let's call text Next.js. TypeScript, sure. Yes, sure. Router, sure. Okay. For the most part, the projects that I'm working with are either Next.js or combination of Next.js and Django. It's a Python-based web framework. It's quite productive, and I was using it for the last 2 years, and besides being Python, I like it very much. So that was the main reason I went with installation of Node and Python at first. However, later on the streams, we are probably going to explore Golang and Zik a bit more, and going to learn about it too. So let's just do this here and open our project in VS Code. Okay, so this VS Code is just fresh install. Nothing is configured here, so it's whatever is default. And let's just navigate to this page. Layout. You can see the things here. Okay, so let's go to extensions first, and let me double check. I believe we do not have to install any TypeScript related extensions these days. Yeah, it just seems to be working fine right away. That's nice. See the types being inherited here, so yep. Now, yep, so I guess this is fine. We'll just close this first, and we are going to open our settings, which would be this one. Yep, right. So let's start one by one. So the VS Code configuration that I use is basically making it so that you are focused on a single editor, you are editing the single file. We use Command P shortcut to jump between files. Essentially, the logic here is to try not to use mouse as much and try not to distract you from the focus on the particular code that you are writing right now. So yeah, with that, we are going to start with configuring sidebar and the things around here. So one of the first thing that we will do is we'll remove the icons from the navigation here. Okay, we are in JSON, so it should be workbench icon theme, and we're going to set it to null. So if we save this, all of the icons will disappear here. I like it this way because icons just distract me, and rarely, but in some cases, it would show the wrong icon, and it's just useless when you have, let's say, like 10 different React components. There is no point to actually have icons on them. Icons might be useful in some cases when you have a project, let's say, somewhat larger monorepo with backend in different language mixed with front end like JavaScript, TypeScript. In that case, it might help, but for my use case, I just find it distracting more than anything. And also, usually in my case, I still like to have this tree. However, I mostly keep it just to get familiarized myself with the overall project structure. However, like when it comes to navigating through the files, I use like Command P or Control P, and that's how I jump between files because I find it more convenient. Yep. So next thing we're going to do is to move this entire sidebar to the right. So it should be sidebar location, right? So the reason I do that is whenever like I open and close this sidebar, I don't want my code to actually shift, because let's say if we have it on the left, and then whenever we open and close it, we'll have our code shifting around, which like actually might not be a big deal for some, but it's quite distracting for me. Yep. So next thing we're going to do is we're going to make sure whenever we open our VS Code like as standalone app, we are going to not have any editors open, because usually the way I open VS Code is I would just go to my project in my terminal and just code dot. So I'll open entire directory via VS Code this way, and I don't need the VS Code to actually keep the history of the editors that I was in, because it allows me essentially every time I start working on some projects, I would have some context in mind of what files I'm going to work with, and it allows me to set those up from the beginning, right? But if let's say when I open my VS Code, I will have like a certain editor open already, it will distract me a little bit, as in it might interrupt my train of thought at that moment. So we are going to set this to none. Okay. Now, next thing is we are going to change theme, and I must give a warning here. So I prefer light theme, and I actually like their default light theme. So I started to use light theme in my editor's terminal and like across OS, mostly because I find that I usually like, there are some days that I code for more than 10 hours, and I find that in dark mode my eyes are getting a bit tired, like past 5 hours maybe. But with light mode it's much more bearable in my opinion. So, but I would say I believe that's an individual preference, so it works for me. And specifically why I use the default like Visual Studio Light theme is because in my opinion it has the best contrast when it comes to the like light theme and the actual syntax highlight here. Okay. Okay, the next thing is one of the hardest change that I do. So for some it might be like a habit to actually have those, but I'm going to remove tabs. So going to set it to none. Now there will be no tabs whatsoever here, and it aligns with my workflow, because again, whenever I need to switch between files, I will just do it via Control P or Command P, right? This is like much faster workflow, and usually whenever you are editing the code, I would say you won't have more than 5 files that you are editing at the same time, and therefore like you can easily have access to them like right here in this menu. You don't need to switch between tabs, because it's like there are two problems with tabs actually. So let me bring it back for a moment. So let's open this file and let's have layout open too. So like you either have to switch between, let's say from this settings JSON, I want to navigate to page, right? You either have to switch them via shortcut. I believe I can press, no, not this one. Hold on, how can I don't even know how I can navigate around between these tabs. Try Control Shift Tab. Is that the one? Maybe. But what I'm trying to say is, even if you are using keyboard shortcut, you'll have to jump between these files by pressing, let's say from settings to page, I'll have to press at least the button at least 2 times to come here. And other way would be clicking on it, which is again distracting, because you have to move your hand to your mouse or to your trackpad, right? And but having no tabs, it will actually kind of force you to get into the habit of using Control P, and because Control P will order files in the most recently used way, right? That works very well for you to switch the files, but not actually get lose your thought process and forget what you were working with. That would annoy me so much. Yeah, that's correct. Yeah, that's why we're doing it. Hi Dohi Yi. So let's set it to none. Okay. And by the way, actually, we have one problem with doing this. I'm going to explain it later. So this entire configuration is basically adapted from my work laptop that I was living with this configuration for about a year, and I'm fine with it. But there are few issues that we're going to try to address now. after I go through all configurations, right? So now next thing, okay, that's purely to remove the icons from the tabs. Actually, if I'm not wrong, this setting would be show icons false. Let me double check. I think team enabled. Yeah, actually, I think if I'm not wrong, this disables this, but I still keep it just in case. This is responsible for icons in the tab, but we don't have tabs, but I still keep these settings just in case. Okay, then the next thing we have is for our file tree. Oh, that would be, wait, that would be tree indent. Yeah, that's the indentation we have here. And this is like purely preference, but it's basically responsible for the spacing like between nested files directories, right? So I know I keep it at 14, but actually we can check. Yeah, I guess I'll keep it at 14. So I want it to be slightly larger than the default because when the project gets large, and considering the fact that we don't have an icons, it's easier to read, to understand the nested structure when there is slightly larger intent. And because my screen is somewhat large, I can actually like expand this window and see all the nested files if I need to. Okay. Now the next thing, we are going to remove these lines. So I don't necessarily need it because assuming that I use this file tree only for reference, I won't actually hover on it and click on it. So therefore these are quite useful, and I'm not sure if there is really a benefit of removing it, but it might be. Like I would imagine there would be maybe like millisecond of performance improvement here. So that's what we're going to do. That will be this one, and we're going to set it on. Now, actually, wait, one thing. We can set it to always to like solve my problem, because in this case I will still see it. But in my opinion, like indent actually solves the problem of me understanding the nested structure, and I don't really need the slides because it's a little bit distracting. Like whenever I look at this tree, all I want to see is the file names and directory names. That's it. Don't want to have anything distracting there. So we are going to disable this minimap. Not really useful in my opinion if you are using like Vim to jump around the files. I would even say even if you are using mouse to scroll through the file, it's still not really required. Now, I still want to have errors to be shown, but there is a smaller, let's actually test this thing if I have the error here. Like this indicator, like right below scroll bar, will actually show me the error anyway. So I know like approximately where it's located in the file. So that's enough for me. Let's go back to settings now. We are going to, that would be editor, editor minimap. Yep, editor minimap. We're going to disable it. So this would disappear now. Yep, that's cool. And yeah, the reason I'm doing it is just to have more space for my code, because later we're going to increase the font size, and yeah, we'll need some extra space if possible. Now, next important thing is we're going to enable format on save. So every time we save the file, it will run whatever formatter you have, configured. So basically, let's say in TypeScript projects, I assume it will be prettier or maybe ESLint or anything, right? So whenever you save the file, it will just format things. So I'm not doing this for the sake of like, because there are other ways to actually format your code, and I wasn't using this for a while, but I realized the good thing about it is that I can write a very, let's say, like, let's just say I can like write one liner like so. So let's say some sort of object, right? So let's do it this way, right? So I can just one line. Let me actually copy this like this. One line some object this way, right? And whenever like I can just keep my thought process going, just be in the flow and write my code. I can one line things. I can write a very aesthetically messy code, and then whenever I save, it will automatically format it for me. So that's the reason why I like to have it on save. So now, yeah, this would be done. Okay, the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to increase the line height, because in my opinion, like all these lines are quite a little bit too close to each other, and it's actually like a habit probably thing. So at one point I was invested a little bit in PHP ecosystem and Laravel ecosystem, and I noticed that a lot of PHP devs like to have increased line height. They're quite famous for it, and I tried it as well for a while, and I actually liked it. So whenever the lines have some spacing between them, it's actually much becomes a little bit easier on the eyes to read it, right? So it might be a little bit weird at first, but I think it makes it easier to read the code later. Okay. Now, okay, yeah. So let's configure our simple things. Actually, we have font family. So for font family, I prefer JetBrains. That's what I use, and I think it would be JetBrains Mono Nerd font. So for this to work, JetBrains font should be installed. In my case, we already installed it for terminal, and yeah, we use the same font for our terminal and our VS Code here, and I installed it via Brew. So yeah, and then we are going to finally do the thing that is important for this stream. Is we are going to increase the font size. So I'm not increasing font size just because of the stream. I actually prefer a larger font size. Even so, this machine is MacBook Pro 16-inch, so it's a rather large screen, and I'm using external monitor now as well. But even before that, what I was using is MacBook Air, which has quite small screen. But even in that case, using 16 as a font size makes it much more comfortable on the eyes, especially when reading like reading React components, reading a lot of JSX, reading Tailwind. Just makes it easier on the eyes, because there is a lot to sometimes there is a lot to grasp and understand. Now let's go to the next setting. So we are going to see this one. We're going to set to false. So this is responsible for showing the colors within the code. So for example, if we have any hex, let's try. I'm actually curious if it even works. Let's do cont color, let's say. Then we are going to set it to some color. Well, it won't work here, but will probably work in here, I imagine. Let me see. It shows here. Let's try to change this to some hex, for example. Well, it doesn't seem to show me the color now. Anyways, but it doesn't matter. I guess there is some specific conditions that it would show this. So yeah, and I just don't like it because for the most part, at least in my case, whenever I use the colors, it would be a part of the theme, a part of Tailwind configuration, so it's not really needed for me, right? And it just distracts me because in some cases, let's say if it shows the colors of your Tailwind, right, and then you have JSX with full of text colors and background colors, then that would get quite distracting actually, right? So now, okay, next thing is a small thing actually, but we're going to remove this. So whenever you search for a file, if you notice now, this Finder pop-up is aligned with my first line. But the default is actually, let's say we comment this out, it will the default, it will create this extra space when you scroll all the way up, which I find just annoying. So yeah, don't want that. I'm going to set it to true, right? It might make sense actually in case if you let's say if you have a, let me scroll this up, if you have a very long line, like this pop-up will actually like be on top of it and block your code. But in my case it's fine because I'm using Vim shortcuts to actually do the search and not Control F. Okay, so that would be false. Close this. Now we are going to disable links because what this does is it allows you to click on the links directly from VS Code, and that's not really what I want to do when I have links in my code. So it's just distracting because it decorates them in certain way. Okay, next thing, we're going to not highlight occurrences of certain symbols. So for example, let me try to create something here. So let's say function get thing. That would be to turn. That would be, yep, yep. So if let's say now let's call this, and whenever we like click on it, what will happen is it will highlight this part and highlight this part, and even if we, let's say if we remove this, like it will still highlight this entire thing, which I just kind of find visually distracting again. So I'm going to turn it off, and if we go back now, wait, actually I think this setting is responsible for something else. Let's try. Yeah, this would turn off. Yeah, okay, now it's fine. So yeah, that's now it just doesn't highlight. Now again, in my case, because usually whenever I want to find occurrences of something, I would just search it via Vim. So I don't really need this. I don't need any visual indicators, right? So we're going to remove this and go back. Now next, yeah, so if you notice, we have like these line indicators which showing you on which line you are. Again, just annoying. I don't think it's that useful, so we're going to remove that. Render line highlight on. Okay, so now that's disappeared. Now next thing would be okay, white space. So we want to have our tabs and like any indentation indicated. So arguably it's also distracting, but because I happen to code in Python, it's a little bit, I would say, it's useful and makes it easier to actually read the structure of the code. And I set it to boundary, which means it will just highlight the beginning and end, right? So if I put spaces here, it will actually indicate that there is space here. So it's sometimes it's also helpful to spot like unnecessary white space at the end of the lines. Now, next thing, okay, we have rounded selection. So this part is, I'm not really sure. Hold on. Controls of the section should have rounded corners. What does it actually change something? Is it talking about the selection of like highlight? That's a good question. I'm pretty sure I just stole this part from somewhere, but I quite forget what it is. Let's actually check. Don't want to have something. Oh, does it actually? Oh yeah, so that's the point. Okay, it just reduces the radius of this highlighted text. Well, makes sense. I added it. Again, preference doesn't really affect much. Now, then we would make sure, just for being more explicit, we're going to make sure that our scroll bars are always visible. So the vertical as well. Yep. So I don't really remember why I added it, but I think there are some cases where like you kind of want scroll bar, but it's not there. And it's not distracting me that much, so I just like to sometimes reference it to notice contextually where I am in the file, like at the bottom, in the middle, or somewhere, right? Yeah, we are going to, together with occurrence highlight, we're going to remove selection highlight because, again, distracting in my opinion. Just put it near here. So again, whenever you highlight something, so let's say if we set it to true, whenever you highlight something, it will show the same occurrences. We don't want that. Yep, just distracting because like whenever you even highlight something like booleans, for example, right, it will highlight all your booleans, which is again, I find distracting, right? So now the next thing that we're going to do, let's see, we have some things to do with colors. Okay, so wait, first thing actually, whenever you have like some functions that you want to fold, so like I want these indicators to be shown. They're not distracting me much, and sometimes they're useful, so I just keep them. I'm not really using them these days, but I think still they might be useful in some cases to scan through like on the specific parts of the code that you want. So I just keep them around. They're not distracting me that much because they don't have like they're not that visible, right? So it's fine for me. Now, then the next thing would be disable the bracket pair colors. So like every time you have like put brackets within like nested structure, it will highlight matching pairs. I don't need that. I just rely on the like this default highlight that is already showing me where is the ending and beginning. And again, like if you are using Vim, it's actually not that useful as well because Vim has keybinds to jump between the closing and opening bracket, right? So we are going to disable that with this editor bracket. That would false. Okay. Now the next thing is we're going to disable breadcrumbs. So we are going to disable this part again. We don't need that. More space for editor. One. It doesn't really matter at this point since I'm hiding the entire thing, but I'm going to disable this part too. Because yeah, it just removes the icons from breadcrumbs. Like even in the case if for some reason I decide to change it back, at least I won't have any icons. That's the point why I'm doing it. Now we are going to add few things to the terminal menu. So I'm not really using built-in vscode terminal. However, in case if I decide to, let's make it a little bit more usable. So I'm going to increase scroll back and we will set it to 5000 so it allows us to scroll for longer. And I'm setting it to the same value we have now in my iTerm, which is the terminal I'm using. Then we are going to set terminal font, integrate the font family. So that will be the same one. Okay. And we are going to set the, let me see actually how it looks. I forget the shortcut for the terminal. Oh wow, that's an interesting shortcut. I think it looks fine for now. I would say we should increase the font as well. So we're going to do that. Font size, and let's set it, I guess, to the same. Yeah, that's fine, I guess. Yeah, works for me. Okay, the next thing I have is window command center false. So what this does is basically removes a bunch of controls from the top here, which again I don't use. So yep, just do it this way. Save. Oh, actually no, it doesn't remove those. Those we need to remove manually if I'm not wrong. Let's try again. Yeah, it removes these parts, which is clickable search menu, go back, forward. Yep. Don't need that, so we just remove it. Going to set something else, so that would be edit workbench actually. Wait, hold on, that would be, let's set it together with the tabs, I would say. So there is one thing about VS Code is whenever you open the files, not what I want. Whenever you open the files, what it does is it opens them in preview mode, and you have to like kind of double click it or start editing it so that it pins and stays as your editor, and that's called preview basically. So we don't want that. It's annoying. I'm going to disable it, and then okay, another thing that we're going to do is that's something I picked up from JetBrains IDEs, but we want to be able to actually, we want to make sure that our file is changed whenever we change focus. So let's say even if I edit this file and then I switch to another file, I want that previous file to be saved, because what will happen when you edit like 3 or 4 or 5 files simultaneously, you might forget to save them and you'll be jumping around, and that might cause some issues because like if you forget to save them and then you want to, let's say, revert something back from Git, for example, and then you will basically have a conflict where VS Code wants to save file that was modified externally, right? So let's say you modified file via Git already. So to avoid that, I will just make sure that we are actually saving the file on focus change, and this will work between whenever you change files and whenever you change windows. So if you jump between VS Code and terminal, for example, it will still save the file. Okay. Okay, another thing is small additions. So in Git view, whenever you are in difference view, like when you compare the files, we want to make sure that it shows the white space too. So we're going to set it to false. So because like even if vscode doesn't show those white spaces, it will actually show up on Git and it will actually be a valid change. So we don't want to ignore that. We want to spot those as well. And yeah, so that's basically it for my configuration. It's not that big, but it allows me to like work faster. And I still use mouse, but not that much. So one last, there are two more things that we're going to do. So one, the most important is we are going to install Vim. I'm using this like the oldest, most famous extension. And we are going to do one hack to actually make it faster. So let's reload our window to make sure that extension is loaded. Okay, so now we have access to Vim, so I can use my JK keys to jump around, right? I'm actually like fine with this extension for the most part, but there is one problem is in some cases, whenever you have a bunch of other extensions installed and you have a larger file that you edit and you have a bunch of other processes running, let's say you have your project running, you have your Docker set up, you have your browser with different tabs, your music, and so on, this Vim extension might get somewhat slow, and you will like literally feel the delay of between jumping lines, right? So one thing that we can do to help with that is to actually have one experimental feature enabled. So it's called extension experimental affinity, and then we are going to enable it for VS Code vim.vim, and then we are just going to enable it. So this basically allows extensions to run on their own process, I believe, which will help with blocking behavior. So I'm still checking out how much it improves things, but for now I think it like, yeah, in my case there were some projects where opening it in VS Code and Vim with Vim extension was actually slowing things down by a lot, and this helped me, so I'm just keeping it here. Okay. And yeah, for the most part, that's basically the config I was living with for like half a year, as I said. But there is one problem that I would like to see if we can check now. It's a very minor thing, but in some cases, so let me actually see what needs some sort of, do we have it here? In some cases, let me see actually. So for this to be tested, we need to, I think we can actually emulate the behavior this way. So yeah, one problem that I have now is whenever, let's say, in some cases when I open Markdown files like with extension or images, what will happen is whenever I open it, it will open the code part of it and it will open the preview part of it. So it will render an image or something in the second window. So now because I don't have tabs enabled, I actually have no idea how to close one individual window that I am currently navigated on. So essentially what I want to be able to do is to be able to close one of these windows, because if let's say we have the tabs shown, I can just like, yeah, close it this way, right? Which is fine. But you can probably use the shortcut, which will actually solve the problem. But it's not really, so like, yeah, the problem here is that the shortcut will be closing all the tabs that I have opened. Although the tabs are not shown, they're still being opened in the background. So Command W will just do it this way. Not sure if we want to do something about this. Let me think how I would go about this. I think that's fine. I think we can just live with that first. Just use this shortcut. Let me work with this setup for a bit, and then we'll find if there is any annoyances that we want to optimize even further. But for the most part, like this is enough for me to start working. So the only few things that I would probably do is just install few Python specific extensions, prettier, and that's all. I'm not an extension heavy user because I feel like having a lot of extension VS Code slows it down a lot. It's already somewhat slow in my opinion, so making it even slower with extension is not something that we want to do, I think. And yeah, that's basically it. So whenever I'm editing the files now, I just Control P, jump between files. I usually type the entire name, so I can edit the files with Vim. I can the Vim integration in VS Code is quite fine. Like most of the things work, and I don't have any issues here, right? So we are good. This is usable for me. One thing that we might try to experiment with is I might increase font even further a bit. Given that I have a larger screen size now, it might make sense. But I think let's keep it at 16 now. So this is something, again, that time will tell if I need to make a change here. But otherwise, like for the most part, I'm happy with this config. So yeah. Now, one small thing that we'll do is we probably want this file to be I want to save this file, so I think what we're gonna do is yeah, we'll just create the settings here. So what we have here already is we have our in dot files we basically have our starship prompt config, we have zshrc config, we have the brew packages that we installed, and we have our iTurn profile. So all of them are version controlled and we can recover them, right? So that's the main reason, and we are going to create a new file. I'm pretty sure there is a better way, but for me it's fine to just create a file. So we just call it vscode settings.json, and we can just open it. So now we can just copy this entire thing, jump here, and paste it here, and save it. So now we are just able to push it. Now, one small thing is, because we are using Stow to manage our symlinks, you can watch my previous VODs to learn about Stow. We are going to add this VS Code to ignore list for Stow so that it doesn't synchronize it in our directories in home folder. VS Code setting, that correct file. Yep. Now let's push this as well. So we're going to see that what we can commit this VS Code setting that we're going to. Yep. So if anyone is interested, where's our notes? So I'm just going to send this link in the chat now. Pop it here. And it will be under this word as well, because the word will be saved. And yeah, that's basically it for today. So we are done with this. Probably for the next stream, what we are going to do is we are going to configure NeoVim as well. So that would be my alternative editor for a while, and I will try to slowly switch to it as my primary editor, but we will see because I'm not sure yet. And yeah, that's it. Thank you everyone for watching. I hope it was a nice stream. Bye bye.